Just a quick reminder that if you are in or around the Toronto area on April 18th at 7 p.m. at the Fox Theatre, me and Will Sloan will be presenting the first screening of the Important Cinema Club Masterpiece Classic series with Jackie Chan's Rumble in the Bronx. We'll be doing an intro on stage, there will be a Gold Ninja video table, and there's even maybe a special video introduction by someone that appears in the movie, which you can only experience by going to the Fox Theatre on April 18th at 7 p.m. I hope to see you there. Hello, my name's Justin DeClue, and I'm here today with
Will Sloan.
And you're listening to the Important Cinema Club. And today, we're talking about one of the great unheralded action directors, Isaac Florentine.
So this is a filmmaker who I've wanted to look into for years. I've been hearing about him for over a decade now.
For me.
From you, but also from the vulgar auteurs. Mm-hmm. And that's probably too deep a rabbit hole to go down now.
Yeah, let's not go down that.
But there have been a lot of people over the years who have said, of all the people making direct-to-video American action movies right now, this guy is the best.
And he's been doing it for a long time. He's been churning away since the late 80s making movies, and his style has only been refined as he went. And his style, I think, is the thing that makes him as impactful as he is, in that he figured out exactly the way that he wanted to present actions in a very specific, bold way, and he also loves the genre, and I think that's very important.
So what I've been hearing about him for years is that there are these direct-to-video action movies, forget about your Steven Seagal, forget about all that stuff. There's this guy who's making them where they're very stripped down, they're not very fancy at all, but the fight scenes, the action scenes will blow your mind. Mm-hmm. And also, these are the movies that made Scott Adkins a star. Now, you may be listening and saying, who's Scott Adkins? Well, first of all, you just saw him in John Wick 4. Mm-hmm. He played the fat guy.
Yes, so he was in a rubber suit for that role.
And you've also seen him in lots of other movies because he's third henchman from the left.
Yeah, and like a Bourne movie.
Or like the Steve Martin Pink Panther or stuff like that.
He was Deadpool after he got his mouth sewn shut in Wolverine Origins.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. But now he is like a bona fide star who's always like one step away from getting the theatrical roles that I think he could handle very well.
Now, the reason that I've never actually explored these Isaac Florentine movies is you look at the filmography and there's so much there, and they're all... Well, so many of them are sequels to movies I've never seen.
So the movies that I picked for Will to watch are all sequels. U.S. Seals 2, Undisputed 2, and Ninja 2, Shadow of a Tear.
And I just want to pause on Undisputed 2 for a sec because it's a sequel to the Walter Hill movie with Wesley Snipes. Mm-hmm. That's who was in it, right? Wesley Snipes?
Absolutely.
And that one, I remember that coming out theatrically. So this is a movie that's from that realm of, I don't know, Snake Eyes 2 or American Psycho 2.
They're still coming out, yeah. Like companies like Universal going, hey, we can put these movies out completely unrelated to them, even though sometimes a new actor will be playing the main role, like Michael J. White in Undisputed 2 is supposed to be Wesley Snipes from Undisputed.
Okay.
It doesn't matter, though. Like that, there's not enough like links to make you have to watch the first one.
And as we know, like if you saw these coming out, if you went to a video store in the mid-2000s, you'd look at those and you'd say, that looks like shit.
Why would I watch that?
Yeah.
And to be honest, most of them are pretty bad, that are done by journeymen who can just crank out a movie like Inside Man 2. Yes, a sequel to the Spike Lee film, came out a couple of years ago, and they can get it done on time, on budget. Maybe someone will enjoy it, but it doesn't really have like big fans.
I do kind of wish I saw some of these movies blind without knowing who it was, because I could just imagine myself renting one of these, watching, the first 10 minutes and thinking this is terrible, and then all of a sudden, when one of the fight starts, just being like, whoa, what was that?
So I have a pretty kind of like legendary, almost pulling the sword out of the stone experience with US Seals 2, because I bought it at a Music World. I think it was like 3 DVDs for $15, which you never see. And I picked up US Seals 2 and Albert Pune's Mean Guns.
Oh my God.
On that same deal.
And this is like when John Lennon bought his first guitar or whatever.
And I think it was because because people at the Kung Fu Cult Cinema Forum recommended it. And U.S. SEALs 2, you look at the cover of the DVD, and it's like a guy in a frogman suit. You could not get a more Photoshop, just generic DVD cover, because the people who made it probably didn't see the film and were just selling what was based on the title.
Now, we'll get to those movies in a second, but just a little bit about Isaac Florentine's background. He was born in Israel. He had the standard youth that lots of people born in Israel have, served in the Israeli Defense League, etc., etc. Grew up loving movies. Sergio Leone, Bruce Lee were two big favorites, as well as the silent clowns, Chaplin, Keaton, Harold Lloyd. He loved them. And it's from the silent comedians in particular that he borrowed his shooting style. Something important to remember about Isaac Florentine when his kind of golden age movies were coming out is this is the shaky cam period. This is when everybody was complaining that there was so much fast cutting and editing in movies like The Bourne Supremacy or whatever, to sort of distract from the fact that like Matt Damon's not a fighter, right?
Mm-hmm. And so he got started making a short film with the amazing title called Farewell Terminator in 1987. And from there, he was able to make a Desert Kickboxer in 1992.
For Golan and Globus's company, or actually, it was not Golan and Globus.
It was one of them, right?
It was Menahem Golan's, the company he had after Canon Films, Desert Kickboxer. You've seen that, right?
Yeah.
What can you say?
It's fairly generic. Like, he's kind of like figuring out what he wants to do. But what's most important, and is kind of the defining text of Isaac Florentine's career, is being hired as the second unit director on Mighty Morphin Power Rangers in 1993.
So what did he bring to Mighty Morphin Power Rangers?
So he shot all of the fight scenes that were like the interstitials between the old footage from the tokusatsu shows from Japan.
So wait, the Japanese show, I'm actually learning about this for the first time. I kind of assumed that any time they had the costume on, that was Japanese stuff.
Incorrect. So they would fight the putties sometimes when they would transform, or even just like sometimes they would fight as well before they would transform, and that would be new footage. That was directed by Isaac Florentine and choreographed by Alpha Stunt Team, mostly led by Koichi Sakamoto, who also choreographed Steve Wang's Drive, one of the most talented action choreographers still working today.
I mean, say what you will about the Power Rangers. You look at the fight scenes on that show. They are good.
Like, they're taking like Hong Kong stunt falls, they're doing Hong Kong spins, and I think that a lot of people who kind of fell in love with martial arts, it comes at first from those Power Rangers episodes. And what he brought to them was a very particular style, which is very whooshy. When someone moves, it's like whoosh, whoosh, very impactful. Every camera move is clearly defined. And I think that style had to come out of the fact that he wanted to make an impact with the way that he shot these fight sequences, to make them not just filler, because he genuinely cared, and the fact that the productions were so low budget that this is the only way he could shoot these fight scenes as well.
People say that the first of his directorial feature credits where you really see the style is his third one, High Voltage, from 1997.
And High Voltage is okay, but he's figuring out kind of what he wants to do. It's about bank robbers. There's like mostly gunfights, which is never his strength. And there's some stunts here or there choreographed by Koichi Sakamoto, but it isn't one that I would recommend people go towards. It's him figuring out like, what am I good at when it comes to doing these kind of action movies? Is it Quentin Tarantino style ripoffs? No, it is not. It is martial arts. That's what I'm passionate about, and that's where he's flourished when he's gotten the opportunity to make those kind of movies.
And before we get to the major movies, I just want to briefly quiz you on Max Havoc, Curse of the Dragon from 2004, because this is, of course, a legendary collaboration between Isaac Florentine and Albert Pyun.
Well, it's not a collaboration.
Okay.
Basically, Albert Pyun shot the movie and he didn't finish it and he was let go, and Isaac Florentine came in to salvage it, and he basically just did the climax of the movie and maybe some little parts throughout, but just to give it a completed film. Would not recommend in any way, shape, or form.
When does Isaac Florentine's golden period start?
I would say that, his golden period definitely starts with a U.S. SEALs 2, but even before then, he's really figuring out what works and is just seeing how far he can push things. So he's always working on the Power Rangers show. Like, they keep bringing him back for stuff like Power Rangers Lightspeed Rescue in 2000, because he's the one who set the template for what the new footage looks like. But then you have stuff like Cold Harvest, which is a post-apocalyptic film film starring Gary Daniels, who seems like he is ready-made to appear in Isaac Florentine films, and it's okay. It feels incredibly cheap, which is something that I will continually say throughout this episode, because Isaac Florentine, for all the success he can do at pulling this stuff off, the budgets get lower and lower. And it should be noted that he mostly works for Avi Lerner, who had New Image and would then later create Millennium Films.
Right, and Millennium Films is sort of like the canon films of the 21st century, where they do a lot of like direct-to-video shit, as well as like they did Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans, and some more artsier movies.
The difference between Golan and Globus and Lerner is that Golan and Globus genuinely loved movies. That like they would put all their money in a Jean-Luc Godard film because they like the idea of funding those types of things. Lerner has been very candid that he just wants to make money. He doesn't care about the movies. As long as there's a return on investment, that's all he is looking for. And so Isaac Florentine has to work within these limitations, very rarely being given enough money to achieve what he wants. For example, Bridge of the Dragons in 1999, Dolph Lundgren, post-apocalyptic. They're shooting in Bulgaria, so you got all of the big sets and, locations. Again, mostly gun action. So Isaac Florentine never seemed to figure out like how he could make gun action work for him. So it's a lot of like Dolph Lundgren jumping to the side, firing a pistol. There'll be like a crazy, someone being shot and falling into a table, but it doesn't give you what you want.
By the way, I was excited for this episode because I knew A, I would see some fun movies, and B, I could just put the quarter in Justin and he would do the heavy lifting.
But US SEALs 2 is when like people went, whoa, who is this Isaac Florentine guy? And it's so funny that it's US SEALs 2 that it happened.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very unpromising looking movie. It is kind of Top Gun meets The Rock, but on a much, much lower budget.
You say Top Gun, like people will be flying planes.
Oh, no.
No.
There's no there's just guys who would be in planes.
Yes.
And, it's, a standard kind of like neo-Cold War adventure where the Russians are, I don't know why the Russians are going to launch a nuclear strike on the U.S., and the best of the best, led by Michael Wirth, the great Bruceploitation scholar, have to infiltrate this disused chemical plant.
Now, you hear all this and you go, oh boy, it's going to be like the previous films. There's one specific thing that makes us pure Florentine.
Oh, is there? Yeah.
Well, on this island that they're going to be on, you can't use any guns because it will cause an explosion. So I guess you'll have to use your fists and whatever weapons are around.
So this movie has an element in it that made me feel like I was going insane while I was watching it, which is anytime anyone moves,
whoosh, whoosh. Any movement.
Not just when they punch, but when somebody raises a finger.
Yes.
It's whoosh.
And that's purely from Power Rangers.
I thought I was going crazy, but it goes, I don't know, it connects with the whole style of the movie, which is in all of these Isaac Florentine movies, for the first 5 or 10 minutes, I think, wow, this looks really bad and tacky. But I think he really embraces badness and tackiness, if that makes sense. He's not out to deconstruct the genre. He wants to give a turbocharged example of the genre. So any cliche, this movie starts and it feels like Decker, and I think he knows that and he likes it.
I think he just enjoys this.
Yeah.
That he wants to push it as far as he can.
And so it's a little bit absurd. All of his choices with the camera are just making these guys look super heroic or super villainous.
And what's interesting about US SEALs 2 is that it's the start of his golden period, and while Michael Wirth is a very talented martial artist, he is still working with people that, while they can throw kicks and punches, I think he has to kind of work around. And it isn't until Scott Adkins comes into the picture that things change. But I want to get back to US SEALs 2 because I don't feel like we have kind of let people know what this movie is when it starts, which is one long hour-long fight scene.
That's right. So it's set up where the terrorists, hijack a plane, and they have this woman on it who's a nuclear physicist who knows how to create an atomic bomb, basically. And then, the SEALs, the best of the best, they infiltrate this factory.
And they all have their own specific weapon. One of the guys uses knives. One of the villains has a big pole that he uses.
This is one where, I mean, the action is good in this movie. It's really well photographed.
Choreographed by Andy Chang, one of JC stunt team members.
But compared to the other ones, I was less impressed by the action as I was just by the general style of it, just the general vibe. It's almost Kung Fu Hustle in the level of
very cartoony
absurdity.
Yes, but he's also figuring out how to show action in compelling ways here, not allowing it to be cutty, also embracing the ridiculousness of it. For example, Andy Chang plays a villain in the movie who uses his scarf as a weapon, so he just takes his scarf off.
Oh yeah, like there's so much creativity. There's so much like thinking about like interesting ways to shoot stuff, interesting things to do with, you know, props and actors. And I don't know, watching this movie, there's just so much like joy that emanates from it. Like it's a really joyous movie, and you just think of all the bad direct-to-video movies.
Well, I think of someone like Bertrand Tavernier, the critic and filmmaker, who said he couldn't believe watching some of the B movies that were made because the people actually tried. And there's a lot of B movies where no one tries, but it takes like 200% effort to go, okay, within these confines, I want to make something good. I care about what I'm making.
Well, there's that Orson Welles quote about, you know, filmmaking is the greatest train set a boy ever had. And I'm sure it's very difficult working for Avi Lerner. I'm sure it's very difficult making a movie for no money in 2 weeks. But like in Florentine, you get this sense of like, okay, but isn't it so fun we're making a movie?
So what is the difference? Just phoning it in and doing it like US SEALs 3, or going and doing scenes where like the villain throws his jacket in the air and then cuts it in half as he like runs towards the guy and they get into a sword fight under sprinklers? It's like, to him, from a like career path, means nothing. Because like Lerner, this movie comes out, makes some money. He's not going to be any more successful if he went all the way, or, you know, he just phoned it in. But he always goes all the way in every movie that he makes. He's creative and he's figuring out a way to present action. No one makes movies like this.
Well, I mean, you look at Keone Waxman, who's Seagal's guy, and it's just so dreary. And I guess it's just so easy to kind of fall into we don't have the time, we don't have the budget.
So why even try?
But like even the dialogue scenes in Florentine's movies, and Florentine like by no means is at his best doing dialogue scenes, but he figures out fun ways to shoot them.
And what's weird about dialogue in Florentine films is they always seem dubbed. Like every movie, even Undisputed II.
Okay, so Undisputed II, which is another one, like, you know, compare it to Ringo Lam's In Hell with JCVD, which like has its good points. But this is another like trapped in a hellhole prison in, you know, Eastern Europe movie, or Russia in this case. And In Hell is sort of like a dreary, unpleasant movie, but this is one where like it starts with Scott Adkins, who's the villain. Boyka, you know, the greatest underground Russian fighter of all time. And it starts with him like, you know, praying to his little shrine in his prison while the music is like, oh, and like this is such cornball cliche shit, but it leans so hard into it. It's on the verge of being a parody of this kind of thing.
Well, if you are leaning that hard into it, I think that when the stuff breaks out that the genre demands is as heightened as that you're like, well, it all works together then.
Totally.
It's all playing on the same wavelength.
And like when Scott Adkins starts talking in that Russian accent of his, and like with the faces he's making, it's almost like he's in a panto play. He's not going for realism at all.
No, I don't think so. And I think that's why the movie is as powerful as it is, because I think a lot of action directors, when they get there, they're like, you know, tone it down. What we're making is silly. And so we want to kind of like take a step back, try to avoid that silliness so people will take it seriously. And by oftentimes doing that, what it results in is like, well, this is boring. Like, why am I watching this?
Totally. And like Undisputed II, which I liked a lot, you know, does not reinvent the wheel, is not at all trying to reinvent the wheel. All the stock characters you would expect are in here.
Wait, does Michael J. White have a cellmate that then betrays him? Of course he does.
All right. Okay. So the plot is, you know, Michael J. White, he's, you know, the retired champion who's trying to make a bit of money. He's trying to, you know, he's doing commercials and stuff. And on some trumped up drug charge, he lands in this Russian hellhole prison. And of course, there are twists and turns. We find out certain people have betrayed him to get him in there. This prison is run very corrupt, run by the mob, and it has this underground bare knuckle brawl ring
that's bet on by the public.
So
they brought Michael J. White in because they want someone to fight their ultimate fighter, Boyka, and will even the odds, make them a little bit money, because Boyka's been winning too much over the years.
And Boyka's played by Scott Adkins, and he's the best of the best. And these two together, you know, you got Scott Adkins doing this kind of like panto performance, and then you've got Michael J. White, who's, you know, hugely charismatic.
Oh, super charismatic. He's one of those actors that you're like, what happened? Why couldn't he take off? He got a Hollywood shot. He starred in Spawn, but that movie did nothing for his
and
career.
Black Dynamite as well, I guess. But I think it's a little bit of that Bruce Campbell problem of like he's almost too handsome. He's like too big on screen.
But like he talks and is like so fun to listen to. You'd want him to be in a series of films where he's the action star and the films are great around him. But instead, you often get stuff like Falcon Rising, which is terrible.
But him and Atkins are so good together because Atkins hams it up as the villain, and Michael Jai White is like able to, his pure physicality kind of like does a lot of the work.
Mm-hmm. And Michael is also like the big muscular boxer, and Scott Atkins is like the guy who flips and does impossible moves, like jumping, throwing a kick, and then in the air he reverses before landing and kicks the guy with his other leg.
I mean, it's some of the best stunts I've seen outside of Hong Kong movies. Like, so, the way that Florentine shoots all these fight scenes, like there'll be medium shots, you see the whole body in the frame.
Long takes usually.
Long takes, like dense with moves.
The thing about Florentine is that he figured out to shoot without coverage. So when you watch these fight scenes, there is no other way to cut these because he doesn't shoot like, all right, let's get a wide of them fighting and then let's get a close up, which is usually how Hollywood productions work. He's like, okay, get these moved correctly. The camera will be moving in a crane going up, and then maybe like you'll see a bunch of fight moves and then it'll whip over to the audience and like zoom into an audience member too. I mean, this film is choreographed by J.J. Perry, who would then go on to choreograph, John Wick 2 and is one of the best action choreographers working in the biz. But when something like Undisputed 2 was being made, these guys who were incredibly talented were oftentimes working on big shows, but weren't in control and could only take control on these little movies, or like Roadhouse 2 is another film that J.J. Perry choreographed.
Now, Ninja 2, Shadow of a Tear is, I think widely considered one of the masterpieces, one of the crown jewels of the Florentine canon. And watching it, I can understand why Florentine has never ascended to the A-list, why he's never escaped that kind of direct-to-video ghetto. Because,
why do you think?
Well, I mean, I like this whole movie, first of all, but, the fight scenes are incredible. And then between the fight scenes, again, he's not transcending the genre. Like some of the dialogue in this movie is a little wonky.
What action movie transcends the genre?
Well, I know, but it's like it's a movie that sort of invites you to think this is tacky, this is ridiculous, or it dares you to think that,
But like, why wouldn't you get that director to do something like The Expendables 2? Yeah.
I completely agree, but I think the idiots who made that look at Ninja 2 and they say, oh yeah, well he's good at the fight stuff, but all this other stuff isn't so good. I think it's that simple.
And like you look at the movie he made before this, Ninja, and that was kind of supposed to be a theatrical release. It was a ripoff of the much beloved Ninja Assassin. Remember that movie that the Wachowskis produced that came out?
God, that's so funny because I feel like more people are probably watching Shadow of a Tear now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I don't know what happened with that movie. It sat on a shelf for a long time, but like they shot, like Ninja has a much bigger budget than most Florentine films. It's on backlots too, so like all the fight scenes take place on these like New York City backlots, but there's like a structural problem. And like Scott Atkins, listen, I love Scott Atkins. His Achilles heel is doing an American accent. That when he does that, he's boring. Like, let him speak his regular speaking voice. Let him do an over-the-top Russian accent. But like in Ninja, his character is basically nothing until he starts fighting like 35 minutes in.
Well, yeah, I felt that way about him in Ninja 2, Shadow of a Tear a bit.
Yeah.
Like, I like him best when he's sort of hamming it up with an accent. But in this one, like, and I say this with as much respect as possible because, like, nobody's better at fighting than him. But like some of the dramatic scenes, I felt a bit of a void there.
I like it when his eyes are filled with tears and he's talking about the death of his wife. Spoiler alert. But like if you look at him in John Wick 4, like he's great in that scene where he's like up against Keanu and all the other actors
very
as well.
Fun.
And like acting wise, not only fighting, which he is very good at. And I heard that like he's so good that it's the stuntmen that have problem keeping up with him. Like they have to hit all their marks. And the way that Isaac Florentine shoots these fight scenes, I picked Ninja Shadow of the Tear. What I should have really picked is Seized, the newest film that Florentine made, only because there is the gigantic gap that if you go from Undisputed 2 to Seized, you're like, my God, they have no resources to work with anymore. Because like Ninja 2, there's like international locations, but you can also see Florentine kind of changing his style where like most of the fight scenes play out in one takes. And that's because Atkins can do that. That there's still that stylization, but like it's simpler, cleaner, because they have almost no resources to work with anymore.
I certainly felt that. I mean, Undisputed 2, which came out in 2006.
Oh, looks great. Shot on film.
And then Ninja Shadow of a Tear, there's a kind of, let's call it late style quality to the visuals of it.
But I think Ninja Shadow of the Tear, there's also like, you can feel Florentine going, let's push this further. Let's push it further. Like the movie is seemingly over, and they're like, oh no, we take the biggest fight scene for last. We're going to take on Kane Kasugi.
Yeah. And I mean, it's ridiculous in a good way. And as it goes along, I feel like there's a sort of escalation. Like this was the first one I watched, and once I got into the wavelength of it, the fact that it was this almost like self-parodic style and it escalates and gets more and more deranged as it goes along. Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it.
The thing about Florentine is he always seemed like 5 years too late, because like if he had showed up right in the early 90s and started directing films in like LA or PM Entertainment, like he would have been perfect for that kind of stuff.
Or how about 5 years too early, because now that John Wick 4 is such a huge movie, I mean, like when Isaac Florentine was making these movies in the early 2010s or late 2000s, that was kind of that Rush Hour 3 era where it's like, well, American audiences, they only want like a 2-minute action scene, and what they really want is the story, the dialogue. Like I could see Isaac Florentine like making a sort of John Wick style movie that could be a huge hit.
The problem with like DTV action movies now is that they have budgets of nothing. So like unless Isaac Florentine gets a gig at like a streaming service and he gets money behind it, there's an issue there, because like Seized was seemingly shot in like 12 days. You cannot shoot an action film in 12 days.
Also, he's not an exciting new talent anymore.
No, that's the other, He's been in the direct-to-video ghetto for so long, you know. But like they're doing a John Wick spinoff called Ballerina, and it's like, you know who they hired to direct that film? Len Wiseman. The guy who did like Underworld, Free or Die Hard, terrible. If you gave Isaac Florentine a call, I'm sure he'd be like, yes, please. Yep, no problem.
Well, before we leave this topic forever, I do want to just quiz you on just some Isaac Florentine movies at random.
Sure.
His Jean-Claude Van Damme movie, The Shepherd Border Patrol from 2008.
Now, that was one that he got because of the success of Undisputed 2, and it was taken out of his hands and re-edited. So there's some really odd editing stuff in that film, but it's better than I remember it being, revisiting it a few years ago. And Jean-Claude Van Damme gives a very odd performance, which I very much enjoy.
Okay, here's a fun one. Christian Slater and Donald Sutherland in 2012's Assassin's Bullet.
Now, I don't know how this one came about. Undisputed 3 played a bunch of film festivals, which is the first for any Isaac Florentine film. Very successful, won some awards, and he was gifted after that film a vanity project for, it feels like the star of this film was maybe in a relationship with one of the producers, because it has that stink about it.
I see.
That like, and it's not an action film. Like, it's barely anything, and I feel bad that Florentine was forced to make this.
Okay, what about his Antonio Banderas vehicle, Acts of Vengeance?
Okay, so this movie I didn't like very much when I watched it, and reading interviews afterwards, I came to understand why it is the way that it is. It has a great concept, which is Banderas takes a vow of silence after his family is murdered until he gets revenge on the people that did it. Big problem with that is that he does voiceover throughout. He just will not shut up and voiceover, which feels like an editing thing that was enforced on Florentine, and it's also a film that came about after, unfortunately, his wife got sick and would go on to pass away, Florentine's wife. And I think that kind of weighs heavily on the project. So you never feel him get the chance to kind of like go as far as he wants to. So you get kind of a more medium style film.
Finally, give me one more good one.
Well, the one that people are probably screaming if they're big Florentine heads to me to talk about is Undisputed 3. And Undisputed 3, a favorite of everybody. It makes Scott Adkins from the villain to the star of the film. It has Mark Zaror, no, I'm mispronouncing that name, who recently appeared in John Wick 4 as the villain. And it's just pure Florentine. It's again in prison. It's again about underground fighting, but it goes even more over the top than Undisputed 2, because there isn't the kind of sheen of like, well, we need to make this look like a real movie. And I think that's why people find it as impactful as it is. And I would still recommend stuff like Seized, that as cheap as it is, it's also fun to see Adkins and Florentine just go as far as they do with so little resources, fighting in McMansions that you know that David Dakota was shooting like a week before in, doing what they're doing with, again, nothing. He has a few movies coming out that look like they're a little bit bigger budget. He has a Frank Grillo action movie, and he's a guy that's like, you know, a DTV action star now. Hopefully he gets a little bit more resources and gets to make something great, but Isaac Florentine has a pass forever. As long as he keeps making movies, I'm going to keep watching them.
So, Justin, do we have any letters this week?
We do have letters. As per usual, you can send us letters at importantcinemaclubpodcast@gmail.com. And our first letter is from Travis Neely. And he goes, "Hello, Important Cinema Club. I'd like to preemptively thank Justin for the batch of Golden Ninja movies I've ordered. Looking forward to watching them. Well, I hope you enjoy them. On the subject of physical media, I was wondering how you approach extras, making them, curating them, etc. A few years ago, I bought the Samuel Fuller box set that Indicator put out, and while I appreciate in abstract the amount of stuff that a label can put on a disc, I had a hard time with the 6.5 hours of outtakes that was included in the set. All of it from a documentary that Tim Robbins made about Fuller. Do you have a throw-it-all-in approach to putting extras together, or is it more focused?"
So, for anybody who might be listening to this podcast for the very first time, Justin is the proprietor of Gold Ninja Video.
So what I learned in the last few days is a lot of people listen to this podcast and had no idea that I did this.
Really?
And do I not talk about it? I feel like I talk about it so much, but clearly I don't enough. So I'll be doing more, I guess, every time there's a new release, I try to mention it. But I guess if you miss an episode or you're like, I don't like that stuff, like you just lose it. So listen to every episode of the Important Cinema Club. That's what it comes down to at the end of the day.
But special features, I mean, I would say...
Yeah, what do you like?
I like the throw-it-all-in approach. I would like the Blu-ray to be kind of like a repository of everything possible. Listen, I'm not going to watch every single outtake of every single thing, but there are some things that I am curious about.
So I'm of the belief that there needs to be an entry-level amount of special features that audiences can experience if they watch the movie and go, okay, let's watch some special features as well. Stuff that is approachable, usually 10 to 15 minutes long, and that there's 1 or 2 per disc, and a commentary if you want to go the extra mile. And then I want to put everything possible that you can have. Like, you don't need to watch those things. They're there. I hope it's not only that. Like, sometimes I'll see a DVD or Blu-ray, and it's like, here's a movie, and here's 6 hours of outtakes. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to watch those 6 hours, but I'm glad they're there. When it comes to long-form outtakes, I mean, it wouldn't really work with the example that is given here, the Samuel Fuller thing. But, like, for example, there's 3 hours of outtakes on Sorority Babes and the Slime Bowl-orama, directed by David Dakota, and he does commentary over them. Like, that's how you want to experience those types of things.
So I got the Blu-ray box set of Monty Python's Flying Circus that they put out a few years ago, and on it was like a lot of footage from all of the raw tapes of the episodes. So like the countdown to filming,
I would love that kind of stuff.
Little asides and stuff. Like on the first episode, the 2 Frenchmen talking about like flying sheep. There are like 3 takes of it, and after the second take, you hear Cleese go, "Oh, come on," and like. It's amazing. It's like finding a new room in a familiar house. But most people don't have that kind of relationship with most things.
So I like that stuff being included. You don't expect to watch it.
It's only for a certain elite favorite thing ever that you would watch that.
Like, I know that Saturn's Core, one of my favorite Blu-ray labels these days, like on SOV movies, still includes 3 hours of outtakes. Like, am I going to watch those? Probably not if it's just the raw outtakes, but it's very interesting that it's there. And if even one person just loves the movie, it's their favorite movie of all time, they'll love those 3 hour of outtakes. So I'd rather they be there than not. And the letter continues, and since I'm here and y'all are open to suggestions for future episodes, I would like to recommend an obscure action filmmaker that might be up y'all's alley, named King Hu.
King Hu, yes.
Based on your Letterboxd profiles,
I've heard of him, yes.
One of you has logged quite a few of his movies, and the other one hasn't logged any? Regardless, thanks for the countless hours of entertainment and brisk conversation. Thanks, Travis.
Well, he's referring to me that I haven't logged any. I have watched...
Yeah, you've seen some.
I've seen them, but I had a time before Letterboxd, and it was from then. But I like King Hu, A Touch of Zen.
Huge subject, though.
Come Drink With Me. I mean, those movies are so long.
I was surprised that, like, King Hu... I think he has like maybe one monograph written about him on A Touch of Zen that was written, but like no books dedicated to him, which is very surprising. And I think it kind of goes back to the availability of his films, which was very scarce for a long time.
Of course, now they've had Criterion releases.
Or in the UK, they've come out.
I kind of have an appetite to watch Touch of Zen again because like it's such a beautiful film. I mean, God.
I believe the last time I watched it was on a very ugly looking like Laserdisc rip, because that's all that was available.
I saw it at the TIFF Lightbox when they played it in like 2015 maybe.
So thank you very much for the letter, and King Hu, we're adding him to our repertoire. Next letter is from Kevin Barr, and he goes, "Hey, Important Cinema Club. Well, 2 years ago, I wrote in asking for advice as a TA just starting grad school. And now I'm graduating with my master's in film studies in May.
Congratulations.
Good luck at finding work. Unless you want to be a teacher, because there's probably opportunities that way.
Probably not, though, actually.
Yeah, actually, no.
Yeah.
This semester, after 3 semesters of TAing, I got to teach a class of my own design, and giving them my thesis was on Doris Wishman, Roberta Findlay, and Something Weird Video. I figured it would be best to teach a class on exploitation cinema. Now that the semester is almost over and I can't second guess every decision I made, I wanted to run the list of films and topics by you guys and see what you think. Is there anything major I missed or would have substitute any other movie in to cover important topics? The list does skew American, but that's primarily because I was able to get the best-looking copies of American exploitation films. Foreign exploitation would likely have to be a whole other class on its own. All right, so we are the final thesis
Arbiters.
Yeah, arbiters.
We will determine if his syllabus is good.
And if it's not, you're going back to school, buddy. You're doing another 3 years.
Okay.
You gotta restart.
Sounds good.
So the lineup is, and I'm gonna go through these a little bit quick because there's 14 weeks of stuff.
And I'll just do a quick answer.
I have to say though, I've said this before, but I don't think I have in a few years. I took one class on film and I found it miserable. I did not like it. I did not like my TA, who seemed disinterested and wasn't, engaging that much.
I took many classes on film of varying quality.
Yeah. And I gotta say, looking at this list of movies, I would be excited every week. Now, this is because I'm going in and I'm knowing this stuff, but I hope that the students that he taught to felt the same way. So week 1, what is exploitation? Ed Wood, 1994, screening to get them in the right mindset for the types of films we'd be watching. I think that's a great start.
Great, yeah.
Great context setter. Week 2, classic exploitation 1, the drug scare film and other 30s oddities, Reefer Madness and Maniac.
Yep.
Would you put a different one in there?
No, I think Reefer Madness is iconic.
Week 3, classic exploitation, the sex hygiene film, Mom and Dad.
There you go. Kids are going to love that one.
Oh, yeah. But
actually, they might find it funny.
Yeah, the thing about this kind of breakdown is that it feels like as a TA, you're giving them something fresh every week, so it's not the same thing every time. You also have week 4, classic exploitation 3, the end of the era, Glenn or Glenda, and the Kroger Bab re-edit of Summer with Monica. Have you seen the Kroger Bag re-edit of Summer with Monica?
No, but I know that he bought Ingmar Bergman's Summer with Monica, and he
sex it up.
There's one scene in that movie where you see a woman's ass, and so, he retitled it Monica, Story of a Bad Girl.
Week 5, 50s teen pics and Roger Corman, Teenage Doll and Bucket of Blood. I've never seen Teenage Doll. Have you?
I think I have, but I'm struggling to remember.
Week 6.
No, wait, I've seen Rock All Night. I haven't seen Teenage Doll.
Week 6, Sexploitation 1, Nudists and Nudies, Nude on the Moon and Boing.
Oh, boing is the sound I'll be making, yes.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully you have to leave the class and leave them to their... Oh, wait, maybe he didn't show these movies. Maybe he just talked about them.
That movie, though, Boing, by Herschel Gordon Lewis, that's a bit of a deeper cut. I like that.
So, week 7, Sexploitation 2, Ruffies, Kinkies, and White Coaters, Aroused, 1966. I'm not familiar with this
I've seen Aroused. It's good. It's a real New York Ruffy,
Week 8, the splatter film, Blood Feast. 2 H.G. Lewis's in this one. And, I mean, if you're talking about the splatter film, Blood Feast is the way to go. Would you recommend another one? I mean, that's the textbook one.
Yeah.
Like the Gruesome Twosome or...
I think Blood Feast has got to be it, and I think they'll have fun. Have you ever been to an Egyptian feast?
And I think it's only an hour long as well.
Basically,
he doesn't say. I wonder, do you watch films in your TA class? Not usually, do you?
Yeah, I used to watch films at school, yeah.
You never were a TA, right?
No.
So next up, we have Week 9, Hippie Exploitation and Manson-sploitation, The Trip.
That's interesting,
That's a fun one. It may be a little slow for the students, but, you're taking a film class. You're probably used to this stuff by then. Week 10, Blaxploitation. Which one would you pick?
I would pick Coffee.
He picked Truck Turner.
Okay.
Which is a more of a deep cut. I believe it's directed by Jonathan. Was that Roger Corman alumni? Kaplan, yeah. And he's got a fun style. I really like Truck Turner. But yeah, it's definitely...
It's a good pick, yeah.
Yeah, good pick. Biker films and car exploitation. What would you go with? That's not Easy Rider. That's not exploitation.
Biker, The Wild Angels.
He went with Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry.
Okay.
Which I think is another good pick.
Okay. Car exploitation, sure. Yeah.
Week 12, Kung Fu's Overseas Influence. Not a Bruce Lee.
Not a Bruce Lee.
Classic, though.
Oh, my God.
One that I would not go with, but I understand its historical value.
Circle of Iron?
No, that would be not one. Circle of Iron. The 36th Chamber of Shaolin.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah. Okay, I was thinking too much like an American film.
Yeah. Because...
But 36th Chamber of Shaolin's iconic.
Iconic one. Exploitation and other foreign exploitation movements. I mean, I would have maybe gone with The Man from Hong Kong,
I might have gone with Mad Max, honestly, the first one. I don't know. But
many
too
people
famous?
have seen it, yeah.
What's he gone for?
Stunt Rock, which
Okay,
is
I've never seen it.
Another film from the director of The Man from Hong Kong. I think the best thing about it is its trailer. And the film itself, it's all right. And Week 14, modern exploitation and spectacle. It's a Hollywood film. What do you think of as like modern exploitation? Mondo-ish almost.
Oh, God.
I don't think you'll get this, but...
Well, if I were to come up with like what would be the most obvious like modern exploitation in a college syllabus, I would pick Hostel.
He actually went with Jackass number 2.
Oh, good pick.
That is a
creative.
good pick.
I like it.
So I think after all of that, and we took a pause, spoke for a few hours, decided if this would be a pass or fail. That's the system that we work under. Absolute pass, no contest.
It's an absolute pass. My only question is, obviously there's not a lot there from the 80s or the 90s. And is that a conscious decision that it's just like focusing on the more classic periods? Because if you're doing the 80s and 90s, you would probably pick something from like Full Moon Entertainment, some kind of direct-to-video thing.
Yeah, I wonder what like the 80s exploitation film is. That Golden and Globus and something like
probably
Enter the Ninja, like Ninja Phase or something, or Godfrey Ho would be another example based on some of the choices that he picked in the syllabus.
Yeah,
but you only have so many weeks to go through this, and I understand that like it's leaning very heavily on like early exploitation to give them that backbone before you get to the stuff that maybe people would have recognized a little bit better.
Good course.
So thank you very much for that letter. And as per usual, if you want to send us letters, it's importantcinemaclubpodcast@gmail.com. So this week on our Patreon, look, it's been long enough. It's time to go back to a subject that's, something that we feel very passionate about, but don't get an opportunity to discuss very much. Jackie Chan, again.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. We did Jackie Chan last week, but we just saw Jackie's new movie, Ride On.
And, it's a two-parter, because at the end of the Gorgeous episode, we go, oh, man, we're excited for Ride On. It could be good. We saw it. We talk about it for somehow longer than Gorgeous. You can check that out on our Patreon, patreon.com/The Important Cinema Club. Is it Jackie Chan's Max Rose? Well, you'll have to watch it to find out.
Jackie Chan's Max Rose.
I use Max Rose all the time, and people are like, what are they talking about? Did we ever do an episode on Max Rose, or did we discuss
I don't think we did. We should do an episode on Max Rose. So next week on the podcast, what could be more different? Gilo Pontecorvo. Now, I might be mispronouncing the name, but he is the director of the Battle of Algiers.
That's right. And he also did not direct that many movies, but he did direct Burn, the Marlon Brando film, which Brando considered one of his best performances, and a few, documentaries after that. So I'm going to look forward to discuss this filmmaker. I got that new imprint Blu-ray of Burn sitting on my shelf.
Very nice.
I may have to watch both cuts because one of the cuts, the English language export version, has Marlon Brando's voice. The second version, which everybody says is superior, the Italian one, does not have Brando's voice. Well, you know what? This director didn't make that many films, so I can probably make that commitment. So, until next week, my name is Justin LeClue.
I'm Will Sloan.
Thanks for listening. I would like to thank some of the new patrons who have recently joined the Important Cinema Club, who include Kenneth Hagerman, Chris Monin, Daniel Kane, W. Buttry, Mia Vitali, Rockwell White, Christopher Abernathy, Juan Damian, Yang Yu Liu, Patty Delaney, Lee Elliott, Matthew McGraw, Cole Flowers, and Chris Moberly. Thank you very much for becoming patrons. We could not do this without you. And just a regular reminder to give us a review on Apple Podcast if you can. And also check out our other podcast that includes Will Sloan on Michael and Us, and me on the Very Fine Comic Book Podcast, the Bay Street Video Podcast, where we go through all the new notable Blu-ray and DVD releases every week, and the No Such Thing as a Bad Movie Podcast.
Well, we are talking about martial arts movies on this episode, and when you think martial arts movie, who's the guy you think of?
Bruce Lee.
Correct. I thought you were going to throw me a curveball, but no, it's Bruce Lee.
I was Bruce Lee. Bruce Love.
No, it's Bruce Lee.
Funny.
It's Bruce Lee, folks. And just before we started recording, I delighted Justin. I knew this would delight him.
Are you using that word?
Yet another Blu-ray company is releasing the 4 Bruce Lee movies all over again.
Now, I admitted to Will something that shocked him to his core, which I don't have any of the Bruce Lee movies on DVD or Blu-ray anymore.
I mean, you used to.
I did. I had that Fortune Star box set that they put out.
I mean, you love martial arts movies.
I do. And
you love the history of martial arts movies.
Yes, I love them.
So you're not... Mr. Kung Fu has no place on your shelf?
Listen, I've seen those movies tons of times. Not as many times as probably most people. but I cannot imagine reaching over to watch The Big Boss myself, short of it being related to some research that I'm doing. Now, this set that is being released by Arrow Films, will I buy it? Maybe.
I'm going to tell you my history of owning Bruce Lee movies. I owned Fists of Fury and The Chinese Connection, which were their American titles.
You know what? I lied. I do have a Bruce Lee film still on DVD, I think. I have that 2-disc edition of Enter the Dragon that was in that slipcase.
Oh, yeah.
And that came with all the documentaries on the second disc.
So I had those movies on, public domain DVDs. Then I had the snapper case of Enter the Dragon, then the 2-disc of Enter the Dragon, which I still have because it has some documentaries on it you can't get anywhere else, including Bruce Lee, A Warrior's Journey. I have the 40th anniversary Blu-ray set. And then I had the Fox Lorber Fortune Star.
Yeah, that's the one I had. The blue case. Thin cases.
That had the 3 movies and Game of Death 2.
Oh, yeah. That was the highlight. I remember watching that and be like,
Game of Death 2.
Not many special features on that set, is there?
There are some interviews and stuff. I had a Chinatown bootleg of Way of the Dragon because the Hong Kong version had extra scenes that were not in the American export cut. Then I had a Hong Kong version of Tower of Death, which is
differently edited than Game of Death 2.
That's right. And then I got the Shout Factory big Blu-ray set.
Oh my God, you've bought them all.
And then Criterion put out their own Bruce Lee set, and I said, I'm not going to buy that. And then Don Semley was selling his Blu-ray collection, and he sold that one for $30. And I thought, $30 for Game of Death 2 on Blu-ray? Yeah, I'm going to get it. And so I have that. So this is how many times I've owned Bruce Lee on Blu-ray. And now I'm looking at this set, this Arrow release, okay?
Canadian,
4K.
if you were going to pay for it, with shipping, would probably come to $250.
$250. Now I'm looking at this, and I'm like, these movies aren't even very good. Why would I want to own...
Do you need to see them in 4K?
No, because they look bad.
Yeah, they look bad.
But then I'm looking at this, and it's like, ooh, newly uncovered deleted scenes from The Big Boss.
Okay.
2 new documentaries on Lee's fighting methods.
What is there left to say about Bruce Lee?
New interviews with actors, including Colleen Camp, who you'll recall was in Game of Death. She didn't work with Bruce.
Okay.
But she's in Game of Death.
Wait, was she in Battle Creek Brawl?
No, that was Christine DeBelle.
Oh, yeah. I like Christine DeBelle.
They're similar types, yeah. And I'm looking at an 80-minute documentary with Tony Raines, and then I'm looking at this, and it's like, I kind of want it. I want it.
Here's what none of the Blu-ray sets have done, and would be an instant purchase for me.
Make the movies good.
No. Would be to get really into the weeds of this stuff. Basically pushing up against a Bruce-ploitation box set, which we hear is coming from Severin someday. For the love of God, when is it going to come?
I want it.
Why is there not the cut of Tower of Death, like the Hong Kong version and Game of Death 2? There's a Korean version of Tower of Death as well. If you can just get a VHS copy of it, because there's no that would be fine as well.
So do you want like a Bruce Lee box set that incorporates more of this, like Bruce Lee, the man, the myth?
Yeah, more of the ephemera. I feel like every Bruce Lee box set up
the real Bruce Lee, Fist of Fear, Touch of Death.
I think the problem is, though, his family is very particular about the way that he's portrayed. So I would almost, bet money that they have final say on this stuff. So you can't really get into the spicy stuff that I would want people to get into. And that's the unfortunate thing with these box sets, is that at the end of the day, all these special features need to be laudatory, and that's all they can be.
Well, in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the Bruce Lee scene, the famous Bruce Lee scene, I am of two minds about this, because I hear people say, oh, Bruce Lee meant so much for representation, he meant so much for Asians in America, and here comes Tarantino wanting to cut him down a peg, and where does he have the right? And I get that, and I increasingly have respect for that point of view. But then,
alternatively, though, Bruce Lee has been the representation for Asia forever.
Yes.
And he's
more God than man.
Yes.
And that scene in that movie is so refreshing, because it's like, that's probably what he was like.
Yeah. You read any biography or anybody talking not in an officially sanctioned thing.
He was a little prick.
Yeah. That's how he was.
Yeah.
So it's refreshing to see it in that way.
That doesn't make him not great.
No.
But he was a human.
He was an asshole. That's very clear. And that none of these discs will be like, man, Bruce Lee was a real jerk.
And that's why that biography that came out a few years ago by Matthew Pauly, the book, is so good, because I was reading that, and it's like, this is the book I always wanted about him, a book that is frank that he was a bit of an asshole.
Which is he got where he was because he was an asshole in certain ways, because there were so many barriers that were in front of him. I'll just reiterate. I just want a Bruce Exploitation box set because I feel like in that I will get perspectives on Bruce Lee that I will not get anywhere else as well.
That's true.
And that's what like interests me the most. I wonder if his family is like no Bruce Exploitation box. Do you think they get involved that much with that kind of stuff?
I don't know. I mean, they shouldn't.
Because like, what else can you learn about Bruce Lee at this point through special features? Like Tony Raines talking about.
Well, it's a good question because I was about to say nothing, but I mean the thing about Bruce Lee is like he appears to be this endlessly adaptable icon. Like he keeps, like his body of work is so fucking small, and yet he adapts to every generation he's in. You look at Dragon, the Bruce Lee story, the biopic from the 90s, and then you look at the biopic that Ang Lee's making now, and that comes out.
I can't believe there's another biopic about Bruce Lee coming out.
But those movies are going to say two entirely different things about what Bruce Lee meant to the world.
But they're still going to be laudatory as well, because his family is probably signing off on that Ang Lee biopic. Sure. And like, if we got a warts and all, a Bruce Lee and I, if you will, the Shaw Brothers production that starred Betty Ting Pei, the woman that
he died in her apartment.
Yeah. And I don't think we can ever get that because he's too much of an icon. And that's the unfortunate thing about him. And that if there was a little bit more humanity that was introduced to him, warts and all, I feel I would probably like him more. And that maybe my reaction is to that kind of like shining light when there's anything dealing with him directly.
Your reaction is also that like Kung Fu, like fan culture hasn't moved past him.
Yes.
Which is like if you get Eastern Heroes magazine.
Which I completely appreciate that they brought it back. It still exists. Eastern Heroes in the 90s ruled because they interviewed all the filmmakers that never got interviewed anywhere else. Like Lisa Onam has discussed articles about all this stuff. They restarted. I'm like, yes, yes, yes. Cover stories about Bruce Lee stuff. I'm like, what?
There's so much. There's so much Hong Kong
That's
film.
clearly what sells, though. Like, that's what people want. So, I can't argue with that, right?
Yeah.
Like, if people want Bruce Lee, give them Bruce Lee.
It's a testament to Bruce Lee. I mean, like, basically, for, like, what, 20 minutes of scenes, basically that scene in Enter the Dragon when he's in the subterranean lair and he's killing all the villains, like, that scene has sustained him for, like, 50 years. And that's amazing.
I would say that, there is a special feature on his fighting style. I'd be curious of a deconstruction of it.
Sorry, I was being unfair because, like, what has also sustained him are the stories of his life and, like he's like a modern myth. And his fighting style, the bee water, all that.
But, like, in David Bordwell's book, Planet Hong Kong, there's some fascinating breakdowns of how Bruce Lee shot and edited his fight scenes and why they're as impactful as they are. So if someone's doing that and, like, breaking down the footage, going, like, shot by shot, movement by movement, I would be interested in that. And maybe one of the documentaries on this Arrow disc does that. So, Arrow, send us a disc.
Yeah,
two sets.
Please.
Yeah. And we'll review them. No problem.
And we will review them positively.
Yeah. If someone sends us something and you hear us talk about it, we will be positive.
We can be bought. Remember that.
100%. Very easily. Arrow. We will do like an episode dedicated to like, the Bruce Lee set. It's so good. You need to get it even though you've bought it like Will 4 times.
5,
before.
6. Yeah.